The next criterion for success is timing. This means the pioneer effects due to first market entry. Generally, when brands or innovation penetrate the market as a first actor, they harvest a pioneer effect because of the different points we have already seen. Because they create standards for customers, they create barriers to competition, they lock customers, and so become the market leader. This is also called the winner takes it all effect. You can cite as an example the Walkman of Sony, or Sony in general with its patents was able to maintain pioneer effects and thus dominate the markets for a long time before new entrants came and abolished these pioneer entry barriers. The next criterion of successful innovation are network externalities. Network externalities is in economics a term that describes how the demand for a product is dependent on the demand of others buying the same product. In other words, the buying patterns of consumers are influenced by others purchasing the products. So the more other consumers buy a given product, the higher will be the utilities for the other users and the higher will be the network externalities. So when the value of the product or the service to each user in the network depends on the total number of users of the product or service, the product service market exhibits direct network externalities. We can cite an example, technology products or social media platforms. The value of, for example, a software package such as Office with Excel or PowerPoint is higher the more users use the software package, because users can exchange files easily if they are compatible. Another example of network externality is the example of game PlayStation. For example, PS4 or Xbox are those examples. The higher the number of users having one of these stations, for example, Xbox, the higher the network externalities, because users can play online with other users, but can also exchange games with other users. If the number of players is low, then the network externalities would be low. The example of social media shows another example of network externalities. If we compare the social media platforms of Facebook and Google, Facebook has more than 2 billion of users worldwide, whereas Google social media has a very low number of users. So the network externalities are very high for Facebook because one can exchange and find information about a lot of other users, and the probability that on Facebook we know other users is very high, whereas for small social media platforms such as Google, this probability is very low, and the interest and the utilities for users to go on Google social media platforms is very low because the network externalities are very low. Another example concerns the application stores. We have Google Play, we have Apple Store with millions or billions of different applications. These providers have high externalities because it's very interesting for other users to use either Google Play or Apple Store, whereas the app stores of Huawei or of Microsoft are very small. They have few applications and few users, so it's difficult to share and to have advantages in these small application stores. Our final example concerns the telephone. When the telephone was launched, only few users had a telephone, so there were few network externalities. The higher the number of phone users increased, the higher became the network externalities and the interest and utilities for telephone users. So direct network effects or externalities are the incremental benefits gained by an existing user for each new user that joins the network. With direct network externalities, the value of a service or a product simply goes up as the number of users goes up. On the other hand, there are indirect network effects. The value of the service or the product increases for one user group when a new user of a different user group joins the network. Taking Uber as an example, as more riders, which are the consumers, join the platform, the more useful and valuable it is to its drivers, which are the producers, because they have more business opportunities. The reverse is also true. As more drivers join the network, riders have shorter waiting times and more locations available for the rides. Thus, the network is more valuable. Or another example of indirect network effects is the one of the application downloading platforms, such as App Store or Google Play, compared to app platforms from Huawei or Microsoft. App Store and Google Play have more incentives for developers to develop apps because the community is much larger than for Microsoft platforms or Huawei platforms. In other words, the higher the number of end users for the apps, the more it becomes attractive for developers of applications. It gives an increasing incentive, and this increases thus the number of applications on the platform, which increase then the value for the users who download the applications. Let's see some precise figures for the app stores. Google Play Store and Apple's App Store are the biggest app stores compared to Samsung Galaxy App and Huawei or Amazon App Stores. The Apple App Store has 2.2 million apps available for download. There are 2.8 million apps available for download on the Google Play Store. On the other hand, Amazon, Samsung, and Huawei only have 500,000 apps available. If we look at the number of active users, there are more than 5 billion mobile users in the world. Google Play and Apple officially share almost half of them, with having each 1 billion of active monthly users downloading apps. So this shows actually the importance of network externalities. So for users of App Store and Google Play, it's much more interesting to be on one of these app stores because you can find more applications and more users with which you can share information or apps. This shows the lack of interest for smaller players such as the Huawei store, where you have fewer users and fewer applications. So there are lower direct network externalities, but also lower indirect network externalities. Because for developers of applications, Apple Store or Google Play Store are much more interesting to develop applications than to develop applications for the Huawei, Samsung, or Amazon application store. And finally, if you again look at Facebook, so Facebook has overpassed 2.6 billion of monthly active users. So it's much more interesting for users to be on Facebook than on Instagram, where there are only 1 billion of monthly active users. And for developers of apps, it's more interesting to be present on Facebook than on Instagram or on the Google social media platform. And so we have there again an example of positive direct user network externalities and indirect developer network externalities. The best way to get positive network externalities are strategies to become industry standard. This can be done by so-called get big, fast strategies to get pioneer effects. This can be achieved by having free offerings. For example, in the app market, free apps help to increase quickly the customer base in order to get a pioneer effect. These customers are then locked through learning effects. Other ways are to give the license of the technology to other players to increase again quickly the customer base. It is useful to establish industry standards to create customer learning and lock-in effects. And once these customer lock-in effects are created, not to switch to other competitive apps. Again, to illustrate that, you can see here the self-reinforcing nature of industry standards and network externalities. So by establishing industry standards and by raising the compatibility of products for customers, the brand reduces fear and uncertainty and doubt. This increases the likelihood of adoption of the technology or of the app. This increases the number of users. And we have then a direct network effect, because as the number of users increase, the value to each user also increases due to direct network effects. On the other hand, if the number of users is increasing, then there is also an increased incentive for developers of the community to develop complementary apps or products, which are called indirect network effects. And if the number of applications or complementary products increase, then also the value to each user will increase due to indirect network effects. And both direct and indirect network effects will increase, again, the likelihood of adoption. The higher the likelihood of adoption, the higher the number of users. And again, there is a virtual circle that will be started due to direct and indirect network effects.